Hi guys, thank you for attending. Welcome to the HBA Environment Bank and the Crosby Associates webinar. Today we're going to be talking about Biodiversity Net Gains units, and I'd like to introduce you to our guest speakers. We've got Alexa, who's the General Counsel for the Environment Bank. We have Rico, who's Head of Policy and Marketing Site for the House Building Association and the National Federation of Builders. We've got Michael from the Senior Construction Manager from ProBuild 360. He's also the Chair of the HBA. And we have Sean Rooney, who's the Principal Planner from the Environment Bank. The webinar is going to take approximately about an hour. We're going to be having a 40 to 45 minute discussion and then 15 to 20 minutes Q&A. So if you've got any questions that you want to be asking, if you put them on the chat board at the end, we will then ask the questions. The questions that we don't get through, we will send over to the speakers and we will ask them if they will kindly inform people the questions.
If you leave your name with those on and with all the questions so that we can get in contact if we need to.
People waiting to be let in there.
Yeah, and we've got a couple of people in the lobby that are waiting to work. We'll go there now, sorted.
Great.
So I'd like to introduce Michael from ProBuild 360. He'll give a brief explanation about why we're doing this, and then he will go into the discussion. So up to you, Michael.
Thank you very much. Happy St. George's Day, everybody. So I'm hoping to represent the voice or the mind of the SME house builder. We have great concerns and frustrations. We've already been suffocated. Our commercial viability for developments has been suffocated to a great degree by various policies that have been added and added and added over the last few years and decades. So that margins are razor thin to the point where, like I say, commercial viability is sometimes is less there than it used to be. BNG is another one of these policies. It's not just our industry. If you look at the farmers' protests in the UK and across Europe at the moment, I think that's a result of the same patterns, and various other industries where you see the smaller end of the market getting suffocated. So BNG feels like another assault on our margins, on our commercial viability, and the lovely people from the Environment Bank are here to put a friendly face to that and explain to us how we can advocate for ourselves and how they can advocate for our developments, and hopefully mitigate the impact that this has on our activities, and minimize the chunk that BNG will take out of our profitability and so on. And yeah, that's it really. So I'm representing the voice of the house builders and asking the questions, and hopefully getting great responses from Alexa and Sean. And I'll pass you over now to Rico, who's a very good friend and colleague, who is probably the most knowledgeable person that I know in terms of how the UK housing industry, policy, legislative frameworks, and so on. So go ahead, Rico.
Oh, thank you very much, Michael. I've been doing this job for quite some time, especially representing SMEs. And so my name is Rico Vucilevich, Head of Policy and Market Insight for the National Federation of Builders and House Builders Association. I get paid to rant on people's behalf, as well as solve problems in the development sector and lobby government for better outcomes. It's a thankless task. And that's good in many ways, because and bad in other. It's good because it means that everyone's busy and working, but it's bad because it means that everyone's so busy trying to get over the hurdles, particularly the planning hurdles, that it just makes life so much more difficult. So I do a bit of a scene setting as to how we got here and why. Effectively, it's kind of started in 2017, 2016. People always wanted kind of a net gain approach, but we've got what's called the district licensing for the Great Crested Newt. And what that kind of did is it accepted loss of the Great Crested Newt, They did eDNA testing to find out where the newts were, and you could get a mitigation license instead of sitting there fencing off all the different sections of your site to make sure that no newts would get in, and then you get an ecologist come in. And the benefits of that is it was cheaper, there are few delays, you could kind of target the species you were going for, it was more strategic, and it meant that you didn't have to wait for the season to come forward and ecology to get involved. So it was a really interesting way to preserve and conserve a species without impacting the development industry. And I think Natural England were great on that. Roll forward a couple more years, and obviously we then got Biodiversity Net Gain. Now, obviously you need to deliver Biodiversity Net Gain on all of your sites, no matter what site it is, and that will probably be extended to homeowners, renovations and things like that going forward. But we have always had concerns, and the major concerns are that really it's a habitat metric, and I think that people like Environment Bank can help mitigate some of those issues. But it's a good and bad and ugly process. So it's good because there are local credits, local planning authorities understand BNG. It's also good because local planning authorities don't understand BNG, which means that it's not being enforced in the way that we are worried it may be. Gardens may be included. That's still conversations going forward, which is good for smaller builders. And there's quite a lot of opposition to it. But the bad is local authorities don't have a clue, which means that they are just passing it on to others, making it harder for smaller builders, especially on the ecology side. There's lots of conflicting advice, no trained staff. Some local authorities are trying to have higher biodiversity net gain without considering what that means for the commercial industry. Some of our members have been committed to 20% BNG for years now. They can't deliver it despite being committed to it. And there are Section 106 issues. I think we'll probably get into a few of them later. And the ugly part is we have seen some local authorities use BNG to oppose development. It's making sites unviable. We're seeing some price gouging of off-site credits. Some local authorities are forcing resubmissions of your planning applications, which is damn costly, and the government really doesn't understand it. And finally, social housing will be reduced. So they're major issues of what's coming forward. And hopefully this webinar helps you understand what you can do. So there is a website online. We'll send you these links. It's bngonline.org.uk, and that'll go through some of the flow diagrams of where you start, where you get to, where you need to put credits in, what are the legal procedures. And I know that we're going to get through some of that today, which is great. There are lots of resources available. So the NFB's got some documents. The government website, gov.uk, Biodiversity Net Gain, if you type that into Google, you'll find it. But you can also obviously let your ecologists deal with it, which really is a fine strategy if you're doing a very large site. But if you're doing a site with less than 50, not good. And if you're doing a site with less than 10, you shouldn't technically need an ecologist. But back to do local authorities know what they're doing? No, so they're forcing that. So finally, what we are doing as a association, as a trade federation, was we're trying to collect all this information. So we'll send you the link to our survey, and please report back anything to ourselves and the Environment Bank, just so that we can understand what are your challenges, because the government has introduced this and they don't quite understand the complexity for smaller sites, fewer than 10, or medium-sized sites, as I like to call them, between 10 and 50, and the rest. So what hopefully we can do is give you an understanding as to what you can do on site, what you can do off site, what you can do next to your site, and what are the legal ramifications of all that. Really, we hope this policy will change so that we get more on-site solutions, but currently you really need to understand the off-site process, because that is where biodiversity is really going to feature, and hopefully we can tell you all about that today. So I'll hand you over now to Alexa, and she will frustrate and delight.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you, Rico and Michael. It's a bleak picture out there for SMEs, and the word crisis is being used a lot, and that's not good at all. And it's a difficult market to be trying to speak positively about something that has caused a lot of pain and is causing pain. And when we spoke before this session, the word existential crisis for SMEs was brought up. Our whole business only works if we are creating a product that SMEs want to buy and that is affordable to buy and doesn't destroy the viability of their schemes. What we're trying to create, and what we think we've created, and which we want to talk to you about today, is what we call a kind of off-the-shelf, clean break biodiversity units. Pay some money, we deal with the rest. That money needs to be affordable, and you can proceed with your development without saddling your scheme with odd little pepper potted bits of biodiversity that have got to be maintained for 30 years. And instead, you contribute to a big landscape scale nature recovery project that we'll be running, and others like us. So we have to make it affordable, we have to make it transactional, and we are here and have been doing this now for the last 2 years, advocating for the SMEs that we're working with to help defend them against arbitrary and varying LPA approaches that we have been encountering across the country. Because we're getting that national picture, we're able to really support SMEs in demonstrating to the local planning authorities that this is an absolutely top-notch solution, and you've got to take a proportionate approach. You've got to recognise how the small sites metric should be being used, and we literally are here to get as much uniformity in the market as we can. So I have got a couple of slides to show you to try and give some context to what an off-site habitat bank looks like, and a bit of insight into how the process works. And please do put in as many questions as you possibly can throughout this session, because from our point of view, we want to be here to answer your questions and support you as we move into this new regime. So we are a provider of off-site habitat banks. We take typically really depleted farmland that's been used intensively for arable to often, and we bring in our ecologists and we co-create with our landowners a habitat management plan to restore the habitats, restore the soil conditions, and to really bring about real vibrant biodiversity in areas where actually biodiversity is depleted often the most, because intensive agriculture has a huge depleting impact on biodiversity. And what we do is we create a kind of grazing regime and an overall 30-year management plan. We fund the capital works, we deliver the capital works, the sowing, the preparing the ground for sowing, scraping ponds, creating the wetlands, planting the trees and scrub. And we are doing this across a network of habitat banks across the country. So we will have done that deal with the landowner. Each landowner is unique, each site is unique. The particular drivers for each landowner can be very different. It's rarely just commercial. There's often a real shared desire to do something to improve the overall environmental benefits of the agricultural holding. Often these habitat banks help to fund farmers' transition towards more sustainable, regenerative agricultural practices. Our plan is to have local habitat banks, to mean that wherever your schemes are being developed, you've got something nearby to tap into to make it a transactional clean break process. Now, this is quite a full-on, quite jazzy diagram here, but everything is about getting you planning. Everything is about being available to you at the design stage, helping you understand what your baseline is, advising on what biodiversity units you would need, what the cost would be, helping you to assess how much might you want to put on site, how much do you want to put off site, how does that mitigation hierarchy apply to what you're doing, and helping you to come up with a solution that really works and complies so that it speeds up and makes easier your planning process. And so again, those units have already been created on our habitat bank, so you haven't got to worry about whether the landowner is really going to follow through with what they're going to do. We already have long leases of these habitat banks, long management plans in place. Very often the creation works have already been done. As we bring on new habitat banks each month, each year, we get cracking on the creation works because we've got the funding to do it up front. We're not waiting for a critical mass of developers to need a critical mass of biodiversity units before we can switch on our habitat banks. Mm-hmm. And then I've forgotten, Sean, when you're going to come in. Sean, my colleague Sean, is principal planner here at Environment Bank. Again, we are staffed to the hilt with ecological, legal and planning experts, literally to smooth that process through planning for you. And none of it is at any extra cost. It is all bound up in the cost of a biodiversity unit. So Sean, do say hello. I've forgotten when you're supposed to come in.
Yeah,
so...
no, I was actually the slide before, Lex.
Oh, sorry.
Right. But yes, we can go back one slide. I just thought, so for context, I'm Sean Rooney, so I'm a principal planner at Environment Bank. So I've had about 10 years as a planning consultant, working on everything from small scale residential and commercial developments, right up to sort of national scale sort of DCOs and national infrastructure to master planning projects. So I was brought in by Environment Bank to assist developers through this new murky waters of BNG legislation. It is difficult. I've dealt with the planning system my whole career, so it's my role to assist you through the planning process. I know how protracted it can be, and it can be difficult, especially as under-resourced as the LPAs are. So from our input, as Lex was saying, it's really important from the beginning of the sort of design process that you carry out a baseline assessment. And this is more important than ever because you need to know exactly what sort of habitat you're dealing with on site. You can get stung if you haven't undertaken an assessment with habitats that you weren't aware of. Sometimes this habitat doesn't look like much to the untrained eye. It could be scrubby habitat, but it could really cost you a lot further down the line. So at this stage, once you've undertaken your assessment, you can now send us the metrics. So it's like an Excel spreadsheet, really complex Excel spreadsheet. And you can forward that over to us and the postcode, and we can get back to you to confirm what units we have available and their cost, and we can set up a call to discuss and talk through it with you. You can then decide what you're going to do on site and what you want to do off site. So what units you want to do at us, and see what sort of mix that's really going to be useful on your site. It's important to note that not all habitats will establish well on the site, so you might have conflicts between the end use. So you've got residential development and you're planning on using some public open space for your habitat. Bear in mind, if people are walking on it and dogs are using it as well, that habitat might not establish. So you're left with the cost of maintaining that over that 30-year period. So it's very important that you understand that. And similarly, you have to think about how it's going to be managed. We have a lot of stories about residents, once this habitat's been established, getting their lawnmowers out and mowing down on that BNG. Again, that liability falls on you. So you really have to think about whether you want to go off-site or on-site, what would be best for you. So we can assist you all through the pre-application stage, whether that's with the biodiversity statements or sort of how it feeds into your documents as well. And then through the application process, obviously, this can take some time, but then you might get consultee comments coming back. We can help you address those consultee comments and a response to the ecologist. Usually during the application stage, that might be when you want to start thinking about reserving the units. You need that to sort of demonstrate to the council that you're in control of them. Some of them are requesting at that stage, just directly requesting that you've got them in control. But again, just keep the dialogue open with us and we're happy to help. With regard to the Section 106, so for any on-site works, this has to be secured by a Section 106, your usual Section 106. For off-site works, so we have overarching Section 106 for each of our habitat banks, also conservation covenants or whatever legal mechanisms are required. So generally we deal with that separately. So as Lex was talking about, it's clean break. It's a completely separate entity, so it makes it as easy as possible for you. You buy the units and you walk off into the sunset and don't worry about it again. At the decision stage, so this is, you'll get a pre-commencement planning condition if it's approved, attached to the consent. And once you've got that pre-commencement planning condition, that's generally when people pay the full amount because we release all the documents that support that. So it's a habitat maintenance and management plan, long leases, and whatever documents that the council require to discharge that planning condition. We can assist you throughout that whole process as required. We've got planning, legal, and ecological experts that are on hand to help. I think finally, if it does go to appeal, you can extend your reservation if required. And we've got planners, like we said, on hand. We've got Lex and the legal team and ecologists that can give you that advice to sort of help you through the appeal process. We have quite a few people that do come to a sort of appeal. Even if BNG wasn't the reason for refusal, they're just trying to reduce any potential reasons the inspector might refuse that permission. I'll pass you back on to Lex now if you could talk a bit more about planning in depth. No
Perfect. And like just to give examples, like because we've got the in-house team, you know, we again, no extra cost, we can whip up variations to your existing 106s and all sorts of things to just help smooth that process and not have your eyes out with legal fees. Also, the only other thing to add is the baseline element. When you are on a small site and the small site's metric applies, if there's no high distinctiveness habitats, there's no high priority habitats. You don't actually need an ecologist to do that assessment. And we're again here to help rationalise LPA expectations on that front, because there is a lot of confusion out there. And because this is the only thing we're focusing on, we know this inside out. It's our job to know it inside out, and it's part of our service, if you like. So you've got a range of ways of delivering BNG. In theory, you've got your on-site delivery, and there's lots of benefits to that in terms of improving what it's like for the humans who live on your scheme. But it is also where it's substantial on-site gains. So when, and again, this is another murky territory of what does substantial on-site gains mean? And again, we'll be here to help argue this with your LPA officers. Is if it is substantial, which means most of your BNG is on site, most of your gains that you need to make is on site, you will need to bind that with a Section 106 agreement, like Sean was saying. So you just got to think through, do you want long-term 30-year obligations attaching to the land, attaching to either your dwelling owner's legal freehold titles or attaching to your management company's title? You've got to think through how much you want that site to be saddled, for want of a better way of putting it, with long-term obligations. While you've always got to honour the mitigation hierarchy and do what you can on site, just bear in mind that where you don't need to do it on site, there can be benefits to a clean break financial transaction to then get your biodiversity gains being delivered as part of a bigger, sort of better, more joined up for nature scheme. You can, of course, do this on your own land or neighbouring land. And again, this is where you'll need an ecologist involved to get a management plan in place that survives the scrutiny of the LPA ecologists. And again, you know, we are talking to LPA ecologists across the country, defending and promoting our own schemes and defending and promoting what our developers are bringing forward. You can buy biodiversity units from a habitat bank like ours, and then of course there's the absolutely dreaded statutory credits, which are intended to be there. The policy reason is that as a last resort, you can contribute to national schemes being run by Natural England. I'm keen to stress as well, we are not Natural England or the government or any kind of authority. We're just a normal company trying to make a bit of money, but doing it in a good way. But I know a lot of people we speak to can sometimes confuse us with the government, and we're not. But when there are statutory credits, they're perishingly expensive. They're deliberately perishingly expensive because therefore I don't want to make the same mistakes that were made in Australia when they brought in a similar scheme to this. In Australia, the whole of the private approach to delivering biodiversity gains just got collapsed by everybody paying towards a statutory scheme, which then collapsed because it just didn't get delivered. So our units are deliberately created in advance so that they're available off the shelf, so you can buy in the tiniest fractions of units too. Like one developer we worked with was literally just extending a pub and was clearly, obviously and rightly really frustrated. He needed to buy something like 0.002 units of scrub. And the good thing was we could deliver that as a simple, straightforward, inexpensive purchase that delivered those gains. He didn't need to try and do it on site. Our unit pricing is all inclusive, no hidden costs. There are a lot of expensive professionals involved in this. The confusion is an ideal place for professionals to make a lot of money, but we're absorbing that in our business costs so that you've got clarity and predictability. And that wraparound care, for want of a better way of putting it, is what we're here to deliver. And sorry, Sean, if you were supposed to say anything then, but cool.
So can I just come in and just make the point that when you are delivering, or if you're considering to deliver it on site, you need to find a responsible body as part of that. That can be a local authority, public body, or charity, or something that's main purpose is conservation. But you can find a private sector organisation. You can set up your own private organisation where some of your main activities are conservation. You have to apply to do that, which might create some complexities, especially for your smaller builders. But you can do it yourself, and there are tools. So there's something called Joe's Bloom's has got a BNG tool where effectively you put in your site details. It's only for smaller sites at the minute. You can use it on larger sites, but it won't help you meet the numbers you need. And actually, this is where Environment Bank is so important. But it'll help you plan your site and plan your site perhaps in a way where the management is lesser. It's worth noting that you need to have money to maintain that on-site stuff, and inspections take place to review the progress. But I do wonder whether actually there'll be some sort of strategy coming forward where certain land types, certain habitats will be easier to maintain. But I still think that you're going to be left with some smaller credits. So going back to what Lex just said there, it's so important when you get those 0.02, whatever it is, because they're the ones that I think are going to end up creating real complexities for many people. So I'll hand you back now.
Yeah, no, well said. And yeah, exactly right. And yeah, working out, what you want to do on site, what's feasible, how you, like lots of local planning authorities are asking for bonds to cover the full 30-year management of these things too. Now, we're geared up to deliver that because we took quite a lot of pride in basically working with the banks to come up with a bond that works here. And again, when you're going off site with someone like us, you don't have to worry about it because we can do it. Again, trying to deploy economies of scale to reduce costs and to address LPA risks. So there's some pitfalls to avoid that we've sort of seen along the way, where we've got risks of merged and clashing responsibilities. We've got certain landowners are not giving their developers a clean break. They're expecting developers to be responsible for the delivery of the gains on their land. And it's almost like their land is a donor site for the developer to do its own thing with the biodiversity. So, watch out for that. Developers are getting rightly confused because they go to different providers and different landowners, and the legal balance of risk is all different in every scenario. We're working really hard to try and bring as much uniformity to that as possible so that there's more predictability for the market. But we offer a clean break, and we are even convening a round table on Section 106 and conservation covenants, bringing together the CLA, the Planning Advisory Service, the City of London Law Society, again, to try and put a load of problems to bed together and avoid every single different lawyer getting involved, all needing to spend tens and tens of thousands of legal fees.
Yeah.
Do try to make sure that you're dealing with someone who can deliver micro units or fractional units, because again, not every landowner is geared up for that, and we think that that's a bit of a blind spot, having only necessarily geared up to support huge schemes that need huge requirements. We've deliberately avoided that pitfall, and we're here to support with micro units, and I know others are too. And we make sure that you're going to be supported, and that the person you're dealing with has got the resource and capacity to attend those LPA meetings, to contribute to your biodiversity gain plan, to provide whatever random and abstract documents the LPA might happen to ask for, which is sometimes pretty unpredictable. You want to know that there is a service that is wrapped around those biodiversity units, beyond just the units, beyond just the land. And then another important point here, which Sean sort of touched upon, is about that site due diligence and your baselining. So one of the biggest sort of challenges that has bubbled up to the surface over these last couple of years, and rightly comes up in a lot of forums that I speak at and I'm listening to others at, which is the dreaded OMH, open mosaic habitat on previously developed land. It's really unassuming. It looks very unexpected when you're looking at a brownfields development and you just see Coke cans and a bit of greenery. Sometimes within that is a very, very highly important habitat for certain important invertebrates. And so whenever you're tendering for a site, whenever you're doing your due diligence, when you're deciding whether to take a site on to develop, make sure you are totally confident that OMH is not there, that you're confident that an ecologist has assessed the site sensibly and it's not there.
Alexa,
oh yeah.
Sorry, can I just fetch Michael in here?
Oh yeah.
From a point of view of someone who's actually working on the ground level, shall we say, and get his thoughts.
Yeah, go for it, of course.
Sure. So I've got a site in Leamington Spa, which we have a planning application in for 10 homes. We've had all kinds of, we use the word arbitrary all the time, I think it is. I would actually invite any of the people listening to talk to me at a later date more about the nature of how the law is being administered so arbitrarily. But that's a different conversation. We've had BNG imposed on that application, even though it was only it's over a year that it's been in, and the BNG has only been enacted into law. When was it, Rico?
12th of Feb.
Right.
And for April for small sites, so fewer than minor size sites.
But
so
that was 10, I
fewer
reckon.
than 9 and below. So yeah,
Yeah.
Mike should have delivered 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've had it imposed on this application, which is frustrating. Another frustrating thing is that we've done all of our validation items throughout, and then after going all the way down, drilling into the detail, they then come back with a fundamental objection, and we have to go back and do all the validations again, all the consultants. This is dead. It's been very frustrating. And so if I sort of throw some questions at you, Alexa, maybe.
Of course.
So one of my questions is, just tell me how much they cost. Like give us an idea. Start telling us, like, you know, how much our credit costs. You know, that would be one question. Another question.
Well, we could say it right now. Should we?
I'll
very
go ahead.
quickly.
Yeah,
yeah. So what do you? I mean, Sean, you know the average is better, but what's
I mean,
the range?
It's important to recognise that no two habitat units are the same. So you could have grassland units which are medium distinctiveness, so they could be like 20.
More unpredictability then.
Yeah, unfortunately, but it's predictable in the sense that the ecologist, once they've done the basin, will tell you exactly what's on the site, and you'll be able to say. And it's the whole point of the metric is that it's a measurable gain, so it actually means everything's measured against the same metric. But once you've got that baseline assessment undertaken, we can give you specific pricing, and we can be specific about what each unit costs as well.
So, and you'd say about 20-ish, a range depending on where, because again, there's the locations and the landowner, the site, the size of site, but a range of like between 20 and.
Yeah, it goes up. So 20, like 20, about 20-ish, 22 for grassland, medium distinctiveness. But then you might have very high distinctiveness of lowland, mixed deciduous woodland or something, might be like 30 plus grand. And then for sort of ponds and ditch, they might be even higher, like there might be 50 grand. But it's important to recognise you might need 0.1 units of that. So the ponds, for instance, units, you generally need a smaller amount of units. So you might need 0.2 units of that. As opposed to, but you might need 5 units of grassland. So yeah, it's quite complex in the sense that they all vary, but we can, if you come to us and ask us, we can sort of give you an indication what it would cost for the units that you require.
Thank you for that answer. So then that would then lead on to the question as to what sort of site is going to, like, so like my site of 10 houses, if I'm looking at that in an appraisal stage and deciding whether to take it on or not, how would I eyeball it and say, okay, I'm gonna need about 1 credit? Do you see what I mean?
That would all be about
without having to come to you guys. Like,
so your best assess, so your best guess is going to be looking at your baseline of what's there. So if what's there is very low distinctiveness, then are you saying 10 dwellings or 9?
10 dwellings on almost exactly an acre.
So you would be looking at the underlying habitats. If it's all pretty low distinctiveness, then again the challenge there is working out, an actual per hectare or per acre is a challenge. But we do have some general rules of thumb, but I can't remember what they are. Like 6 units per hectare.
Maybe we could put your general rules of thumb together in into a document or something that we could put out to everyone that's listening to this conversation, and to myself, because I'm learning all this stuff at the same time. If I could just carry on with a couple of questions. So and maybe Rico, you can help me out here. Are there any, what we've got with BNG is we've basically created an economy with these credits of the currency, and we sort of created an economy out of this. And are there any mechanisms against what you might call hyperinflation? So, say a couple of years down the line, we're seeing the prices just start skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Are there any control mechanisms within the policy?
So basically the normal macroeconomic forces will prevent the pricing going too high.
Well, that's what you guys kind of are, isn't it? You're providing a free market alternative to the statutory credits.
Exactly. Right. And what we're trying to do, the point is these developments won't happen if the price of units kicks them out of viability.
Yes.
So actually then we die with the market. So we have to, like any kind of free market, we've got the pricing signals that we send out, that you guys just can reject it because this scheme won't happen. And so there's those important market forces at play. And that's where, as providers of biodiversity units, we all together need to know that if we're too over ambitious about what we think we're going to get for these, then we're going to kill this policy as well as a load of SMEs in the process.
So
can I come in there just on
please
that,
do,
Michael?
Rico.
So there are some complexities, particularly with delivering locally. So we're seeing particularly with water credits. So if you've got to deliver any water credits on site, some of our members are quoting £250,000 a unit because you have to go to the statutory method, and there just simply isn't anything locally. Some local authorities are really up on this. That comes back to something I said earlier. Are they using this to close down development? Because unfortunately, it doesn't matter what they say, are they NIMBYs? I suspect there's a concern there. When you're eyeballing a site, again, I mean, there will be other tools available, but we're working exclusively with Joe's Blooms on their tool, because effectively it allows you to, they have some mapping, so they know what's on the site, but also you have to kind of do that. If you've ever looked at the small sites metric, we call it the Excel spreadsheet of doom. It's a nightmare, but the Joe's Blooms one's really nice because you can kind of put in all these things, you can eyeball it, and they'll tell you what it is. It already works. It's a really good one. So it costs, but at least you can eyeball the site before and then come back to your landowner and say, this is what it might cost to deliver. On the, what Lex said there about an industry opening up for this, they're a bit of a rarity, Environment Bank, because actually we're seeing a lot of price gouging, especially locally, because there are so few people delivering. And the main concern we're having is the combination of your planning system. And I think that we need to talk to your local authorities about this, how long it takes to get planning across the line and how long you can secure the legal agreement for that price of the credit. Because if it takes you 2 years to get planning across the line, but you've only got that price available to you for a year, is the price going to go inflated afterwards? That's a main concern. So has the Environment Bank kind of looked at that? How long can you secure for?
So we can allow long-term options and long-term reservation agreements. So
can you define what long-term is?
So they can go all the way up to years if they need to. So, because we want to be part of the strategic decision-making process for the developers that we're working with, they'll be getting board approval to go for something possibly 5 years before they're anywhere near getting an application in. And we have to be part of that strategic solution. So it has to work that way because of the timescales you have to work towards. So we go right the way from a developer deciding whether to go ahead with a site or not, and knowing that they can safely secure these units. Land promoters, of course, are also interested to make sure that they've got some kind of solution there. They're scared of depressing land values with all of this. Then right to the last minute where somebody's, in a right state before appeal and they need something quick and they need something instantly. So that we have to accommodate these full range of timescales, which isn't easy, but it is the way that this industry works, and we have to work with that.
I think it's just worth noting that it's worth having these conversations with your local authority, because we are seeing 1 or 2 local authorities that perhaps are more up on this. And typically what I find within the sector is one local authority does one thing and then the others follow. So we're seeing some local authorities effectively say, if you submit your planning application like this, and we're going to reject it, you then must resubmit it. And perhaps if you're doing some off-site credits you're doing some on-site, but you're doing what's blue line. So blue line is the stuff you're going to do with a landowner perhaps next to your site.
Right.
Get that right and find out what your local authority wants you to do, and try and have a sensible conversation. That may not happen at this stage yet because some local authorities do something different. But that Section 106 agreement, and I guess that's the clean break that Lex was talking about. That clean break allows you to not have those conversations. But I think on the smaller sites, people will want to ensure that they can have a mix, and putting that mix into your legal agreement with the local authority can be very complicated, because they may say, no, I don't want it like this. You've got to name the landowner, you've got to name who's going to be responsible. So that's where the clean break comes in. I still think that the more can be done to remove that barrier, but for now it's important for everybody to know that clean break is going to make life a lot easier.
Totally. And what I would say is, like, absolutely essential reading out of all of the loads and loads and loads of guidance notes on the government website. The essential reading to my mind is the planning practice guidance on BNG, because that says very clearly that local planning authorities should not be refusing planning permission because of BNG. They should only, because it's not your famous Grampian condition anymore, because it's as long as it is capable of being delivered at some point in the future, which it is, because exactly.
The MPPF, I think it's paragraph 38, 39, something like that, imparts a responsibility on planning departments to work constructively towards approval. And I throw that paragraph around all the time. Unfortunately, it's necessary to do so. And it's like recently there was a ministerial statement given, much in great part thanks to the work that Rico does, telling local authorities to not randomly set energy performance standards above and beyond the building control requirements. And all of these things. So, as you know, when I introduced the conversation, I was saying that it's not just BNG. This conversation is a much wider trend. There's something happening. I'll keep the conversation focused on BNG in this webinar, but this is part of a much bigger picture. But what you guys are talking about is excellent, and I'll just go back to talking about these market forces, because I don't think people realize how important this is, that the private entities like Environment Bank, how we should be engaging like we are right now as much as possible, and talking as an industry as much as possible, and sharing the experiences that we're having as much as possible. Because if we don't do that, what we risk is, if BNG or any of these other policies are intended or used and wielded in a way that is intended to suffocate our commercial viability to the point where we're not building anymore, and thereby consolidating the industry into the hands of the the big nationals and so on, which would be terrible because they're low quality products. If we're not talking and engaging enough and being vocal enough, that will sneak up on us, and we'll be suffocated silently. And you'll just say, isn't he building anymore? And you go, no, he's just doing his rental portfolios now. He's had enough. And people start dropping off one by one. And you'll turn around and it'll just be that 7 or 8 or 9% will be at 0% suddenly, and you'll be like, where are all the high quality, design led, conscientious SME house builders? And you'd be like, they're extinct. So we must keep talking like this and supporting, working together. As you guys are the nice face to something horrible, and you know that. Like at the end of the day, Alexa, you're a lawyer. So you know all about that. But yeah, if you guys weren't there, we'd be in the hands of tyrants, basically. And
this is literally what we were so proud to invent. Like in a way, like what we are proud to have invented is something that's supposed to take that pain away, like the district newts licensing thing. You know, that's what we're trying to do here. We're being buffeted around. I kind of jokingly call it bludgeoned 3 ways. We're being bludgeoned, of course, by landowners who are often overexcited by the statutory credit pricing and need managing expectations, need managing down. Bludgeoned by LPAs who are arbitrary, and bludgeoned by developers that are hating this and are facing their own challenges around affordability and viability. And in that is somewhere in there is a solution that we want to be bringing to this market, that we already are bringing to this market, that takes that pain away. But it's crucial that it's affordable, and it's crucial that people understand you can even have a clean break like this. But and not everybody does yet know that. We haven't necessarily been able to reach that side of the market properly, but we have been for the last 2 years now running for free and fun CPD sessions, teaching anyone that will listen to us about how the policy works, how it's landing, and that's to us all part of making this a success. And we're really, this is an open invitation. There, the phrase we always use, there is no question too small. We live and breathe this policy, a bit like Rico, and you know, we're here to try and find a solution that works.
You've got 5 minutes.
I would also extend that open invitation from our side as well. You know, we've got a great podcast. We have, you know, local politicians. Andy Street's done it. Anyone that's watching, yourself, Alexa, Sean, Rico's done the podcast. You know, just engage with us. You know, the more we talk about this, the more we can. The conversation is the defense against tyrannical administration of this.
We do understand the conflicts as well, and we're trying to help work through them, like OMH, like Lex meant before, like, you know, the government's trying to encourage brownfield first policy, and you know, we've got like an vacant industrial site. You got vacant industrial site, and then OMH establishes on that site, and then that's a site that they're trying to encourage development on, yet the OMH will make it expensive, and there's a viability question. Then we're here to help work through that. You know, I'm a planning consultant, I've worked for 10 years, so I'm very aware of the frustrations and how protracted it can be, but our whole model is built on helping people through planning and getting planning permission. So that's what we're aiming to do through these units in the clean break approach.
Can I say on the affordable pain that Alexa just mentioned, what's the, because we're kind of moving to the question section now, what is the initial site, you can do it, I guess, initial site assessments for developers. What's the kind of cost for that?
So normally the developer's own ecologist would do the site survey, the baseline survey. Then what we can do is help them make sure that they're applying it appropriately in a BNG context, help apply the trading rules, which again is a question from Ben Elsie there. And we can also help find ways to juggle around within what is totally permitted in the trading rules to get the best, most cost-effective solution, because it's not always like for like. So that's where we would get involved.
Okay, so you would do the initial site assessments, and it's worth noting that if you're on a site, if you've got a minor size site, fewer than 9, technically you just need a competent person to be able to do that. So you don't need the college to do that initial assessment.
Exactly.
We're trying to actually work out what competent means, but effectively, if you can take some photos, that may qualify you as a competent person if you can get them identified correctly. So that on a smaller site is important.
I would just add, I know that we've talked about Joe's Blooms. So obviously we're deciding that it's appropriate to plug someone's company. So, which is kind of what we're all doing anyway. So I just want to throw ArbTech into the conversation, because they've been my ecologists in for my Hawks Farm site, and Jonathan Studdart, I think his name is, the BNG guy there, and they've been fantastic. So if you need a good ecology consultant, ArbTech are excellent, and I think they cover the whole country.
Just to kind of move, I guess, to the Q&A, because I've only got 10 minutes. I know, Nick, I'll just answer one in the chat and then I'll hand over to you. Somebody asked, Robert Carter said, if gardens are in private land and not monitors, it has a lower net gain value. Well, yeah, you're correct. But we're seeing some local authorities, I can't remember which one, a couple in Scotland especially looked at it, including BNG on garden sites, the new covenant. We actually proposed this to the government a few years ago, as well as on-site solutions. They liked the covenant of particular parts of a garden. You would need it monitored, obviously. But I think this is down to what a local authority is doing here, because some local authorities will want it, some won't. Some will see it as a benefit to have that locally, some won't counter the metric, which will be reviewed in 2 years' time. We can't quite say just yet.
And sorry, I'm burning to jump in there to say also watch out what your buyers' lenders will accept, because you know, the lender might just totally have a fit if they see a covenant on the garden that they're not expecting. So just watch out for that. Yeah,
it's a massive one. Yeah, the clean break thing, I think, is a massive not USP, that's the wrong word. It's probably the most important thing.
Important structural part of this whole policy.
Yeah, it's an important part of the conversation to get people to understand the benefit of that, because God knows, you know, like I said when we last spoke, I'm not a gardener. I don't want a career of 30 years having to maintain some, you know, bushes and ponds. Like, it's not what I do. I want to throw bricks up.
So thanks, guys. It looks like been a real good discussion. Hopefully some people have taken some good ideas away from what you've been saying. You've answered a couple of the questions that have been posted. Robert asked if I thought if habitat is in private garden, is it not monitored but has a lower net gain value, which Rico answered. Dan is asking, can Environment Bank carry out the initial site assessment?
Yeah, so we don't currently do that. But what we do want to help is that we almost have like a small site survival guide of like trying to help developers find local ecologists.
That would be brilliant.
Yeah.
We have relationships with numerous ecologists as well, which we could direct you to point to the right people for the right job.
And I do think, you know, Joe's Bloom's tools is a really important tool, and remembering, as long as you can take a photo, you know, you don't, you know, for a small site you don't need one.
So so Ben is also asking, can a developer purchase multiple units for future offsetting?
Definitely. You 100% can, and we can do a massively nice price for those, because if you buy them early, it reduces our costs of business just in terms of the way our business is set up. We're just capable of delivering them more cheaply, more cost effectively. And also, it's a bit technical, but in the metric, you get rewarded the closer to their target condition the habitats are. So if you buy your units now, but you don't actually need them for a couple of years, you are going to be using them when they are even more established and closer to their target condition, and you get rewarded for that in the metric. So you can need fewer units to do what you need to do because you bought them early. So we really do want to encourage that, because you know, long-term reservations are a challenge, but we have to do them because that's what the market needs. But buying them early is one way to get a really good price that's better than you could ever normally get, because it just works out better that way.
Okay. Amy's asking, how close does the off-site location of the source of the credits have to be to the development site?
Question.
Brilliant question. So, as all of this policy signals from DEFRA were saying for the last 2-3 years, the metric includes what's called a spatial multiplier. So the metric recognises that in technical terms, you might deliver biodiversity units in Northumberland for a development in Cornwall. Now, the way that works is that the metric says if you're delivering it far away, you've got to deliver double the gains. So you just deliver double the gains for nature to make up for the fact that it's far away. If you're delivering the gains in an adjacent local planning authority area or national character area, then you just need to deliver 33% more gains. That's the strange way.
Where's the 33% come from?
The spreadsheet of doom.
Yeah, wasn't it 10%? Didn't it start out at 10%?
No, I've only ever known it at 33%, but then I may not have been around in the old days.
Am I right, Rico, or wrong? Was it 10? Wasn't it originally supposed to be 10%?
That's 10% for the local policy, but if you're doing a spatial multiplier, that's when it kind of goes up. It's worth noting on the previous question, can you purchase multiple units for offsetting? Yes, but you can also use so if you deliver 12% or 20% on a site that requires 10%, you can actually sell those credits or use them on a future development. So actually, if you've got a very large site that you're delivering in a particular type of way, you could use that on a different site later down the line.
You totally can. And I'd add to that, Rico, that just bear in mind that if you do that, what you are doing is you're creating a habitat bank on your development site, which then means it has to have a Section 106 or a conservation covenant, and it has to be registered on the game site register. But that's no reason to put you off, but just remember that those formalities would need to be met if you want to sell the surplus.
Right.
Ben's also asking, does a developer have to offset the BNG with what they have built on, i.e. woodland to woodland, or can it be a mix of habitats?
So that's where the trading rules come in. So there's an attempted recognition that you can't always replace like for like. And there are certain things that are acceptable to interchange, like grasslands and meadow. And Sean, you know the woodland ones better than me, but
again, it's like a currency.
Exactly, it's attempted to be like that, but so very much geospatially.
So silly.
So yeah, like the medium distinctiveness habitats can be replaced by any of the very high distinctiveness habitats, but the high distinctiveness have to replace like for like, and the same very high distinctiveness can be used interchangeably as well. It's quite nuanced, but once you've got your baseline and done all your assessment, more than happy we can look through it and tell you what you need to provide.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a little point here that this is, for me, the flaw of the whole strategy. We're replacing habitats, not tackling biodiversity. Really, this is a habitat net gain approach, not a biodiversity net gain approach. So we're pushing to kind of, someone asked me a question about invertebrates. How do we help invertebrates? Well, we're not helping them. We're not interested in helping them. We're just replacing habitats. So really, it's kind of
we have to do that separately.
Extending the baseline. Well, you may have to do that separately on a planning application, for example.
Because you have your ecology and then you have your BNG ecology.
Yeah, and that is all.
We are pushing for that.
Very fair points, and certainly, of course, what DEFRA is doing is treating the habitats as a proxy for the success of the underlying species. But the other really interesting thing is what this is now doing is enabling us to generate the kinds of data nationally that we need to see, do these habitats actually bring the species on board? Does it actually deliver what we think it's going to deliver? And at least there's a starting point to start to even begin to understand that.
That's actually occurring at the moment. Sat in a meeting with DEFRA a couple of days ago in Natural England. They're starting to do those baselines to find out. Some would hope that they've done that beforehand, but actually that helps us in our discussions, because especially with the on-site solutions, if anyone is doing a site, perhaps delivering particular types of solutions, and they're baselining it before, I know Thacum tried this, and they're going to baseline it after, they're going to show what's improved. We can actually show that species is improving. We can be ahead of the government curve. That's not for this webinar, because I think that really kind of what the environment is doing is solving your current issues. But again, in 2 years' time, we need to gather as much information as possible, because that's when we're allowed to review the current metric strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. Roger's asking, if planning was agreed before the 12th of Feb, but then we changed the scheme, does BDNG apply?
So good question. No, unless you do a resubmission. Sean's nodding. Sorry, to let you speak.
No, so section 73. So when you're amending the original planning permission, it goes by the date of the original planning permission. So if that is submitted before, it'd be exempt.
But if it goes for a full resubmission, then it would be court.
And this is back to what I said earlier about local authorities pushing for resubmissions. If you propose something in their section, in your section 106, and they disagree with, then they might actually ask you to resubmit and say you must do it this way. We're seeing that starting to come through. This is obviously the issue with many local authorities having different views. So you may like to bring that up with a local authority to confirm. You may not, to try and get it through. But if they then bring it up, please let us know, because it's the only way the government can realise that there are issues when you do something across 340 odd local authorities.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions we've got, and I think we're just coming up towards the hour mark. So I think we should, at this point, just close. And I'd like to thank Alexa, Rico, Michael and Sean for taking part.
Thank you.
I hope that the discussion and the questions and answers that they've provided has given you all some idea as to how it's going to affect you. Again, they are there if you want to speak to them. Speak to the Environment Bank, Alexa, and Sean will help you and give as much help as possible. Rico from the HBA, obviously his knowledge is invaluable. Reach out to Rico. And Michael as well, as I say, boots on the ground. Michael is the one that has to implement all these rules and regulations and navigate a way through them. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare, and hopefully you know, at some point we can get things
Yeah.
into some perspective.
Well, it's good friends that get you through things like this, isn't it? So
That
No,
mind.
we're really grateful to have this chance to speak to you all.
yes, likewise.
really
Thank
important.
you all very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Speak
Great.
Thanks,
soon.
Thanks,
everyone.
guys. Thank you.
Cheers.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.